wasn't supposed to open the door that morning, but the man standing there knew my name, my childhood secrets, and the one moment I never told anyone. Then he said the words that froze my blood. "Robin, you're living the wrong version of your life." I wasn't supposed to open the door that morning, but something, maybe instinct, maybe fate, made my hand turn the knob, and when I pulled it open, a man I had never seen before was standing on my porch, drenched from the rain, breathing like he had run miles just to find me. And before I could even ask who he was or why he knew where I lived, he looked straight into my eyes and whispered my full name. My real full name, including the middle one I never used. The one only my mother ever said when she was scared for me. And hearing it come from the mouth of a stranger froze my blood cold. But what he said next was the thing that split my world in half. "Robin, you're living the wrong version of your life." At first, I laughed, because what else do you do when someone says something insane at 7 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday? But the expression on his face wasn't the kind of intense you see on unstable people. It was the kind you see on someone who carries the weight of something they shouldn't know, like a truth too big for one person to hold. And before I could close the door or step back, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an object wrapped in old cloth, the edges frayed like it had survived fire or time itself, and he held it out toward me with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, saying, "Please, Robin, if you don't take this right now, everything that's supposed to happen to you will never happen." And against every sane instinct I had, I took it. The cloth felt warm, unnaturally warm, like it had been sitting in the sun even though it was pouring outside. And when I unwrapped it, I found a photograph, one I had never taken, never seen, never lived, showing me standing next to a woman whose face I recognized but couldn't place. A woman who looked at me in the picture the way someone looks at the person they trust most in the world. And behind us was a house I didn't recognize but somehow felt like home. And on the back of the photograph was a single handwritten line: "You promised you wouldn't forget her." My stomach dropped, because if this was some kind of prank, it was too elaborate, too emotionally precise, too much like something pulled from a memory I didn't know I had. And when I looked back up at the man, he said the one thing that made every hair on my arms stand on end: "Robin, you did forget her." I asked him who she was, where this picture came from, why my signature was on the back, written in handwriting identical to mine, except for one thing: a slight curve on the R that I used to have as a child but stopped doing when I was 9. That detail broke me, because no one alive could know that. Not unless they had seen things they shouldn't or been to places that didn't exist. And when I demanded answers, he stepped into my house without waiting for permission, dripping water onto the hardwood floor, and said, "I only have 1 hour before they realize I'm here, before they realize I crossed over." And those words hit me like a car crash, because crossed over wasn't something people casually said. And for a moment I wondered if he meant death, ghosts, alternate lives, or something far worse. He walked into my living room and looked around like he was looking for versions of objects that were supposed to be there, his eyes scanning the shelves, the photos, the books, comparing them to some invisible checklist, and he muttered under his breath, "They already changed this timeline too much." I'm almost too late, and that's when fear finally hit me hard enough to shake my spine, because these were not words you heard from ordinary people, and no matter how much I wanted to rationalize what was happening, the photograph in my hand anchored me to a truth I could not unsee. I asked him his name, because for all I knew he might have been a stalker, a delusional fan, someone who had built an entire fantasy around me. But he answered in a way that made my legs weaken. My name won't matter to you until the end, but you called me Daniel once. Back when you still remembered what happened on that bridge. That sentence felt like someone reached inside my chest and squeezed. Because I had nightmares, recurring, suffocating nightmares about a bridge I could never identify. A place that smelled like rain and iron, where someone was crying and I was running toward them but always woke up before I reached them. And now this man was speaking about it like it was real, like it had happened, like it was a memory instead of a dream. I sat down because my knees couldn't hold me anymore, and the man Daniel apparently kneeled in front of me like someone kneeling before a dying candle, desperate to keep it lit. And he said, "Robin, listen to me carefully. At 11:47 tonight, you are going to receive a phone call. Do not answer it. If you do, everything in this photo will remain erased forever. If you don't," she comes back. My throat closed because the way he said she felt sacred, tragic, like a word soaked in grief and hope all at once. And I asked him who she was, but he only whispered, "The person who should have been in your life all along." And I felt tears burning behind my eyes for reasons I couldn't explain. He then reached for my hands, whispering a sentence that carved itself into my soul. "They took your memories, Robin, not because you were weak, but because you were dangerous when you loved someone too deeply." I didn't understand what he meant. Not fully, but some part of me, the buried part. The forgotten part felt a sharp, painful ache, like the echo of a life I had lived and lost. And Daniel stood up suddenly, glancing toward the window as if someone was approaching the house. And he said, "I shouldn't have stayed this long. They'll feel the shift." And I grabbed his sleeve, begging him not to leave, demanding answers, but he shook his head. "You'll remember everything in the second timeline," he promised, "but only if you don't answer the call." He ran out the door like a hunted animal, vanishing into the rain, leaving me alone with a photograph that shouldn't exist and a deadline that felt like the edge of destiny itself. I stared at the picture for so long that I memorized every pixel. The woman's smile, the way her hand rested on my shoulder, the sunlight on our faces, the familiarity in her eyes, and the terrifying truth that some part of me knew her even if my conscious mind didn't. And as the day passed, as the clock moved closer and closer to 11:47, one question consumed me like fire: what version of my life had I been living? And what version was I supposed to live instead? The hours between Daniel's disappearance and 11:47 felt like years collapsing inward, every minute stretching like a thin thread ready to snap. And while I moved around the house, trying to convince myself that I was still sane, still grounded in the world I thought I knew, every shadow felt heavier, every sound sharper, as if the air itself was aware of what I had been told. I kept the photograph with me the entire day, unable to place it anywhere else, afraid it might slip into some crack between realities if I looked away for too long. And each time I turned it over and saw the line, "You promised you wouldn't forget her." It felt like someone pressing on a bruise I never knew I had. The more I stared at her face, the more something inside me cracked open a faint memory, like the ghost of a laugh, a pair of eyes looking back at me with a mix of mischief and tenderness, a voice saying my name in a way nobody ever had. It wasn't a full memory, more like the shadow of one, but it was enough to make a loneliness I didn't understand rise in my chest. I'd spent years trying to fill a void I didn't have a name for. Now I suspected that void had a face, a life, a story, and that someone or something had ripped all of it out of me. By late afternoon, the rain stopped, leaving behind a strange stillness, the kind of silence that feels staged, like the world holding its breath. I tried doing normal things, making tea, feeding the dog, turning on the television, but everything felt artificial, like I was walking through a life that wasn't mine. At one point, I caught my reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize the look in my own eyes. Fear mixed with a sense of being on the edge of something too big to contain. As night came, the anxiety inside me sharpened, and every passing minute felt like another step toward a cliff I couldn't see the bottom of. Around 10:30, when the sky outside had turned into a sheet of darkest blue, I sat on the living room floor with the photograph placed in front of me, just staring at it, the silence so loud I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears. That's when the first flicker happened, not in the room, but in my memory. It was like a film reel skipping into place, and suddenly there I was, standing on a bridge soaked in moonlight, breathless, calling someone's name, a woman's name, but the wind swallowed the sound before I could hear it clearly. A second flicker, her hand slipping from mine, not in fear but in trust, like she knew I'd pull her back. A third flicker, the promise, whispered under our breaths. We don't forget each other. Not in any life. I gasped and grabbed my chest because I felt that promise like someone pressing a hot hand against my heart. Then it vanished, leaving me shaking. I didn't know if these flashes were memories returning or my imagination stitching together the pieces out of desperation. But they felt real, too real. At 11:30, the house changed. It was subtle, but undeniable. The temperature dropped, the air thickened, and the lights dimmed just slightly, as if the electrical current had shifted. I stood completely still, listening, my breath shallow. Then I heard the soft hum of something that didn't belong to this world, like a frequency just out of human reach, vibrating behind the walls. A moment later, the second flicker happened, but this time not in memory, in reality. The photograph on the floor blurred, as if the image was dissolving. I lunged for it, grabbing it before it could vanish. And for a split second, the woman's face shifted, not in shape, but in expression, as if she knew the moment was coming. That scared me more than anything Daniel had said. I backed up and pressed my back to the wall, clutching the photo like a lifeline. The world felt wrong, slightly tilted, like reality itself had misaligned. And then the clock hit 11:47. The phone rang. Not my cell phone, the landline. The one I never used. The one I sometimes forgot even existed. The shrill ring cut through the house like a blade, and every instinct in me screamed to move, to answer, to pick up and end the suspense, to hear a voice that felt like it belonged to a story I had lost. My legs moved on their own, carrying me toward the table where the phone sat like a relic from another era. The ring echoed, each one growing heavier, pulling me closer. I reached out. My fingers hovered over the receiver. And then my hand stopped. Her voice whispered inside my mind, soft as falling dust. Don't. I yanked my hand back like the phone was on fire. The ringing continued, louder now, more urgent. The shadows in the room deepened. The hum in the walls intensified. For a moment, I thought the house itself might split open. And then, with a final ringing cry, the phone fell silent. The stillness that followed was suffocating, as if the world had paused to see what choice I had made. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, 3 times, and suddenly everything in the room, the walls, the air, even the floor beneath my feet, not dramatically, but undeniably, like a lens snapping into focus. Something in the air brightened, warmed, pulsed. I stumbled backward, gripping the photograph so tightly that the edges cut into my skin. And then she appeared, not like a ghost or a vision, not like a hallucination or some magical projection. She appeared the way a memory returns sharp, sudden, heartbreakingly familiar. She was standing at the far end of the room, wearing the same clothes she wore in the photograph. The same gentle smile tugging at her lips, the same eyes filled with quiet fire. She looked at me like she had been waiting for a lifetime. My heart stopped. "Robin," she whispered, and the sound of my name in her voice cracked me open like nothing ever had. "You remembered." My knees buckled as a flood of memories poured in. No longer flickers but full scenes. Her laughter echoing in the hallway of an apartment we once shared. Her hand in mine as we watched fireworks on a rooftop. Her head on my shoulder as she told me the one truth we were never supposed to forget, that we had been given to lives. Two paths, and had chosen each other in both, until someone tore those paths apart. Why did they erase you? I choked out. She walked toward me, footsteps soft, almost weightless. "Because we weren't meant to exist together in this line," she said gently. "We changed too much, loved too deeply, altered to many futures." She reached up and touched my face with a tenderness that shattered me. "But love always finds its echo, Robin, even across timelines." I clung to her hands, terrified she might vanish again. "Daniel," I whispered. "Was he?" She nodded. "Yes, the child we were meant to have." The ground dropped beneath me. Why did he look older than me? She smiled sadly. "Because he lived a different timeline, one in which you never remembered me, and he grew up without you." Tears blurred my vision. "Is he safe?" She nodded. "He is now." The room pulsed again, gently this time, like the world was healing. "What happens to us now?" I asked, terrified of the answer. She cupped my face in her hands. "Now, you lived the version of your life you were always meant to live, the one they tried to erase, the one in which you know you were loved, and never alone." I pulled her into my arms, holding her like I could fuse time back together with sheer will. And as the world steadied around us, as the warmth returned and the shadows retreated, I felt something settle inside me, a peace I had never known, not in this lifetime. She leaned close and whispered, "This time, don't forget." And just like that, everything made sense. Not the timelines, not the rules, not the strange shifts in reality, but the truth at the center of it all. Love doesn't vanish when memories are taken. It waits, it survives, it finds its way back. And if you felt something while listening to this SIF, it stirred a forgotten corner of your heart, then stay with me. Like, comment, subscribe. Because none of us should walk through this strange, beautiful life alone.